I will say that I see a big potential for value creation. When I look at the business perspective of AI, we'll have a better way to reach more people faster at bigger scale.
AI is going to end up transforming huge swaths of the economy and of society, not just journalism, but we're on the cusp of things like synthetic text generation, which are going to flood our public social media channels with a lot of junk, a lot of junk news. Part of the interesting challenge for journalism is going to be how to counteract that oversupply of junk and really find the quality stuff.
It's going to free up a lot of energy and potential, put us human journalists or managers in the role that we can actually, talk to real people again. We can focus on making journalism better.
We will see a lot more adoption in smaller places of these tools and techniques, more meaningful research between academics, between the research arms of professional companies and regular newsroom.
AI technologies are part of our infrastructures.
The video AI tools getting cheaper.
First, you'll have the thing that writes the text, then you'll have the model that can detect the text was written by a model. Like you can imagine this endless cycle of innovation.
The biggest revolution is yet to come, and it will mean that it comes here. It will be real time and mobile, and that combination of being in the hands of everyone, being real-time, like real-time translation or real-time image generation, real-time video thing, that will be quite the next shift then.
That was absolutely brilliant. And no pressure on the panelists this time around to come up with similarly spectacular and indeed largely, I think, accurate predictions to match your predecessors who have done similar sort of crystal ball gazing, as we're going to try and do a bit at least today. I'm really pleased to welcome three fantastic people who are both practitioners working on AI and with journalists on AI, but also people who are thought leaders, people who have to think big on this, have to think strategically, and have to think ahead. I hope, at least, anyway, that's what you're going to do. Anyway, we've got Nikita Roy, who runs a fantastic podcast called Newsroom Robots, which obviously talks about journalism and AI. She's a Knight Fellow as well. Welcome, Nikita. A secret here, I'm talking to you from Kenya, where I'm at a conference that's looking at journalism, AI, and hate speech in Africa. And Nikita is a few rooms down, I think, somewhere as well. So they're really global. Also got with us Charlene Rolls, who I assume you are not that far from here as well. Where are you tonight, Charlene?
I am in Cape Town. So
yeah,
a little bit far, a little bit further than Nikita.
It's a long way, but it's the same continent, isn't it? And Clement Baccar, who is head of data and AI with a fantastic video news company called Brut, or Brut, in France, which I don't know, should be known much better internationally. It's phenomenally successful for some years in France. So I wanted to kick off, first of all, though, very quickly, you guys, just to explain, what your role is and, the kind of mission of what you do. Let's start with Nikita.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Charlie, and hi, Charlene and Clement. So great to see all of you. I'm the founder of Newsroom Robots Lab. We are an AI training and advisory lab that's dedicated to helping news organizations navigate this AI transformation. And you might know me from the Newsroom Robots podcast, where I talk to news leaders about what's happening with AI and how they're implementing it. And this year, I've also been a Knight Fellow at the International Center for Journalists, where my work has focused specifically on building AI literacy in the news industry and helping bridge that gap between technological capabilities and what practical newsroom applications look like and how to implement it responsibly and effectively.
Charlene?
So I've been a journalist and an editor for most of my career. For the past year, I've been working in trying to figure out what are we going to do with AI. Like our CEO said, we have to do something. And so I was fully immersed in this role and trying to figure out how are we going to do training, how are we going to figure out what tools to use, getting editorial guidelines in place. Pretty much, there was no blueprint really. We have a machine learning team, but it's data scientists are different from journalists.
And just tell us in a sentence what Media 24 is, because again, it's a big organization in South Africa.
Yeah. So Media 24 has different business units. We have the largest digital news platforms, News 24 and Netwerk 24. We have a TV business, we have a books business, and lots of different brands, magazines. And so it's not just one brand where we focus on one thing, and different brands need different things, vastly different audiences. So it's been quite interesting also to see how the different teams have responded to AI. You have some people who are early adopters, and then you have some people who are hardcore critics, and then most people are in the middle, and they kind of go, well, I don't really know. Do I like it? Do I not like it? But my role is to help people figure out how can you use it and where is it valuable and what can it do for you. So we're doing kind of figuring out what training works and then discovering use cases and setting guidelines, which I think many people have spoken about today. And once we got to do that, really just experimenting and playing and figuring out like what can we do, and then incorporating it in our different newsrooms for our different audiences. Or at this point, it's mostly for our teams, but it's kind of been my focus.
According to your job title, in an accelerated way, which I think is a kind of great thing.
Yes, I actually just as of this week started it officially, and not just a secondment anymore, because we've seen that this is not going away. It's just going to get more. Yeah.
Fantastic. Clement, what does Head of Data and AI do at a video news?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Clement, Head of Data and AI at Brut. That is a French-based media, but we also have Newsroom operating for the Indian market, Africa, and also in the US. But we are famous more for the French market. And we are publishing mainly on social media like Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and so on. And so my role here as Brut is to coordinate all the data and AI initiatives that we are leading with all the company, but obviously also with the newsroom. We have a team of 6 data and AI specialists, engineers, product, and analysts. Working in the middle of the newsroom, so we are physically at the office in the middle of the newsroom to develop a generative AI and machine learning project.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always think it's interesting where they put the tech people. You know, when I was in a newsroom and the internet had just come along, the internet guy, of course it was a guy, was in a corridor miles away from the newsroom, and obviously that's changed, and that's great. I'm going to ask you all now kind of what you feel is happening, not just the individual products you're doing, but, there was obviously we're sort of in year 2 of generative AI in particular. And there was incredible hype, wasn't there, to start with? Both very negative hype, people saying it was going to perhaps take jobs, or it was hugely inaccurate, it hallucinated, that it was a mess. And then there was the hype mainly from the tech companies, of course, themselves, who were saying, well, look, this is going to transform your business overnight, and it's going to save you loads of money and be incredibly creative. Nikita, you have quite a good overview because you deal with so many different places and companies and so on. Where do you think we are on that kind of post-hype cycle, if we are post it?
We are definitely reaching the more plateau of that hype. But what's really been what we've seen in this industry this year especially has been a very proactive approach towards AI literacy and integration, which I think has been promising. It's just not been like isolated experiments here and there, especially a lot of the larger newsrooms, even smaller newsrooms, systematically moving towards a movement where we are understanding and leveraging AI. And it's no longer just in the shadows. And I think we've seen that a lot, just like industry-wide. Before that, it was just journalism AI. I would think of like the main AI journal organizations supporting journalists. And now we are having all the way from like WANIFRA, INMA, ONA. I launched the AI Journalism Lab at CUNY this year. Like there's so much more activities around just investing in journalists, making them familiar with this technology, and then helping them build tools, which I think is the next progress and that we're really going to see. And one of the key areas that has been really impactful, I would say, is the diversity of use cases. And we have started with transcription and translation and how can we generate headlines and SEO metadata. But a lot of what we've now focused on is how can we make sense from large data sets in real time, being able to find patterns in data that journalists can go and investigate. How can we reach more people meaningfully, maybe through chatbots, or in Aftonbladet, they launched an AI-generated rap music. So news is music, where they were converting articles into these AI-generated rap songs. These experiments to figure out how can they reach Gen Z? How can you reach more people? Like you having an EU election chatbot, so many different types of chatbots that were there for Olympics. La Nation did one, UOL they did for tax advice, and then you're seeing Washington Post do something for climate coverage. So different ways in which we can reach people. And so that's where I think it's been really promising. We are seeing newsrooms now take things to the next level, build a basic AI literacy. I think the AI literacy part still has ways to go, but we've made a lot of progress since where we were last year. Now we're figuring out how can we now grapple with the next set of questions, which is what does the business model of news look like in an AI age? And how do we move beyond the next generation of how we reach our audience? And what does that look like? So a lot of promising stuff over there.
Yeah. And Charlene, I mean, obviously Media 24 only exists because of the internet. You're sort of digital native, I suppose is the phrase. But I wonder how, and you have some experience. I wonder how you feel what you've been through this last year compares to, previous iterations of having to cope with the changes in social media or mobile, smartphones and so on, and just the changing audience behavior and so on. I mean, where do you put this on the sort of scale of seismic, and also just how do you characterize it compared to that?
Yeah, I think this is, and many people have said this before, it is on the same level as the invention of the internet. It is huge, and we're going to see a slowdown in the hype, as Nikita said, but not a slowdown in adoption, not a slowdown in innovation and moving forward. I think what this will force us to do is to think a lot more about audience and what our audiences want, and not just what we think they should have, like they ought to have this. Consumers will start to expect things if they want to listen, read, have it adapt to them. They're going to expect us to do that for them. And I think traditionally we were quite constrained by cost. So cost in terms of time, of money, of people. And what AI has now done and will continue to do is make more things possible. So we can dream a lot bigger and we can do a lot bigger. And I think the way we think about what does content mean currently, it's actually in our hands. So if you think about social media, it was very much we were still creating the same kind of content. It was in the hands of the social media platforms. We created for platforms. But what generative AI in particular has allowed is for us to take back that control and start to create our own things. I think it was Mansoor who said he doesn't have much coding experience, but he built a site, that it makes it possible for journalists to go, I have this idea, and instead of waiting for a tech person, or it goes on the roadmap and it's in the pipeline, and maybe 3 months or 6 months down the line, you might get feedback on, maybe we'll do it next year. Now you can actually go, well, let me go and see if this thing can actually do it for me. So it's made it a lot easier for journalists to actually grab opportunities. And I think that's incredible, because if you take what we know as journalists about media, about content, about storytelling, about making a difference in society, and you pair that with what the opportunities that the tools afford, then that is like next level. And I think this year has been very much about discovering what tools you can use, discovering what's possible, discovering what is hype and what isn't. Every other day there's a ChatGPT killer. But the stuff that matters, that's the stuff we will focus on in the year ahead. I think businesses will start to focus a lot more on return on investment. Is it worth doing this? And then I think, when, and Nikita also alluded to this, we are going to start seeing a lot more innovation. So the low hanging fruit is there, all the things she mentioned, but we're going to see people make that leap from efficiency and productivity to innovation and really interesting things, whether it is storytelling in the way that we know it or not. I'm not sure where we are headed, but I do know that people coming into our newsrooms now, young people who, in a way, in the same way that there are people who don't know world before Google or world before the internet, they are now going to be like, well, I don't know how to work without AI. And what they might bring, so if you match that with experienced journalists, and you have young journalists, and then you have and the kind of engineers and data scientists, and you put them all together in a mix, that I'm super excited about where we are headed.
And you feel that's happening right now,
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. So I mean, the level of training that is required for people to just get on, before people get started, they're like not sure, and they may be a little embarrassed to say they don't know. And I hear this a lot, where people say, I always feel like everybody knows a lot more than me.
Yeah.
And what we've been encouraging is, well, share what you know and ask other people, because there might be 3 people sitting next to you doing something amazing that would benefit you. So we're also trying to share that, because when people start using it, they see the benefit. Like we use everyone at Media24 now has access to a tool called Token. It's similar to ChatGPT. It's an AI assistant. And the more people use it, the more they discover how useful it is. And saving between 3 and 15 hours a week, that's huge. And then they go, okay, well, now I can do it. So I feel confident enough to do it. And then they start thinking about innovative stuff. Then it's not just, I'm going to use it to transcribe or translate. Like, I wonder if it can do this. And then they try it. And sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it does. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. People are going to try things that they wouldn't have dreamed of doing last year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to talk more about the future sort of opportunities and risks, of course. Just coming to you, Clement, and obviously both you and Media24, as I said, digital natives. I wondered, in a way, though, you're a video news organization, and the one thing that people keep raising is this idea of dependency upon a format or dependency on a particular platform. Famously the Facebook video pivot, for example. How are you sort of coping with that? How have you been thinking about that, thinking it through this year? Your kind of direction of travel?
Yeah, so this year with generative AI for us has been a really intense year where we have experimented a lot of things because we wanted to gain practical experience using those tools, and not only listening what is said on the LinkedIn post. So we've been doing a lot of training for journalists, but also for us, because we also had fear and anxiety the same way that we see to journalists. We also have the same things for developers and data practitioners towards their job. So we focus a lot on that to understand the limitations, the risk, but also the opportunities and how it works in a practical way. And we set up a safe place for people to work with generative AI. It means that more concretely, we have developed a guide, a practical guide for Newsroom, how to use and how to not use generative AI when producing content. So that was the first step of our strategy. And then we categorize all the projects that we have into 3 main categories. So creativity, productivity, and audience intelligence, because we think that generative AI can also help us to better understand our audience. I have a laptop update right now. So we have tested a lot of things. So we started by avatars, video translations, video adaptation to articles. So we try to have a better distribution of our content and of our format, from videos to articles, from videos to podcasts, from videos from one language to another one. And we realize that the audience really doesn't really matter if the video has been created while using a generative AI or not. We analyze the performance of the content, but also the comments. And there are less than 1% of the comments that were talking about the AI voice or the lip syncing that were used for the videos. So
that's really interesting. You know, and I wonder why that is, because when there have been surveys which say people are going, oh, you know, and I'm a bit skeptical about the surveys because I'm not sure that people understand what AI is or even what journalism is. But that's interesting. You've got some practical results there that people aren't put off.
Yeah, at our scale, obviously, on Brut videos, but we realized that only the topic of the video matter to the performance, not really the fact of using generative AI to produce the voiceover, not really the fact of using generative AI to produce the lip sync of the video or any other techniques. So it was quite encouraging for us, and we felt that we had an opportunity for lots of other use cases. And to better understand our audience, we are doing a lot of comments analysis to feed the newsroom with the feedback of the people into the videos, because sometimes we have hundreds or thousands of comments per week, cross-platform, cross-country, and we catching those comments, and we are making digests for them, and this is extremely useful to produce new videos that is matching perfectly with the expectation of the audience. So that's the kind of experimentation that we have done so far. Yeah,
that's brilliant. What were the three categories you said? Creativity, something, and audiences. What was the middle one?
Productivity and
productivity. Yeah,
audience.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's nice. Nikita, thinking a little bit ahead now, let's sort of look forward. I want you to put your not pessimistic hat on, but your cautious hat on. What do you think are the risks, let's put it like that around this technology for newsrooms in particular? We're familiar with the bigger risks. We're familiar that, if you use this for recruitment, it can be discriminatory, it might have biases and so on. We're aware that, it's not so good at Global South languages, for example. But what are people telling you? What do you think are the kind of concerns or risks that people should be thinking about going forward? And sorry, can I just say to the audience, we'll be coming to questions in about 10 minutes or so. If you could put your questions in the Q&A rather than the chat, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry, Nikita, I was interrupting you.
No worries. So what I'm thinking, the way in which we need to be thinking about the risks of AI is not just blindly following what tech companies are putting forward in front of you, but I feel the biggest risk where we don't really capitalize on AI is going to be if we don't lead in this AI revolution as well. And what I mean by that is being able to think about and lead these technological capabilities that's happening with our own journalistic values. The technology that is being built right now is not in line with journalism's values. And how do we evolve it and transform and build products and services that are in line with it? That's going to be like the fundamental shift that is going to happen with AI technologies. In addition to that, I think one of the biggest risks is the risk to the business model of news. We're already seeing with like AI generative search experience that's there, it is fundamentally changing the business model where it's no longer you're seeing the blue links and you're optimizing for it to be the first blue link on a Google search page, but it's about conversations. And I think news, if you are in the business of producing content, you won't be in business for much longer because anybody can produce content. The AI revolution is really democratizing content production where anyone can do that. The biggest risk now and the biggest focus that we need to be having is how can we architect understanding for our audience? How can we build experiences where we are of service to our audience, where news is not just a product, but news is of a service that is something that is needed for them, and how do they get information that is making sense to them that they are able to use? Because there are going to be lots and lots of people who are able to do the exact same news that you are doing, because it's so easy to now maybe replicate a news website, just take the content that the BBC is producing, put another spin to it, and then you have another news website. That's just how easy people can create with the ease of these AI technologies. You're having, like, on social media, multiple different videos that can be out there. But why are people going to come to you? And I think one of the other biggest risks at the same time is going to be if you're not integrating AI as well into our newsrooms, the lack of the decline in trust that's going to be there. And so this is also another big issue and revolution that we need to be focusing on, is how are we going to bring our audience along with this entire change in how we integrate AI into newsrooms.
Great, thanks, Nikita. Charlene, you mentioned, for example, that I think you said you'd been drawing up guidelines internally and having that conversation. So perhaps you're paying attention to the internal risks. But I wondered what are the things that, you know, it could be barriers perhaps rather than risks that you foresee over this next year or so.
So the biggest, I think, for any media organization right now, the biggest risk would just be to do nothing and just kind of try and figure out, like, maybe it will happen organically. That's just a bad idea. Your employees are going to use AI whether you have sanctioned it or not. The best, I think, if you think they're not using it and you say, well, this is banned or that's banned, they're just going to use it behind your back. They're going to use a VPN. They're going to use their cell phones or whatever the case may be. So not doing anything is not an option. Thinking about audience and how do you remain relevant in a time when AI overviews, you're not seeing the traffic come to your site, when someone can use ChatGPT with voice without having to type anything. How are you going to stay relevant to your audience? How are you going to keep giving them what they want? How are you going to help them to understand that what you do is still valuable and that it's worth paying for? I think there's a huge risk in just ignoring that, like not understanding what consumers want and how they are changing. You know, I recently saw a piece about online shopping, and the feature was about a consumer would go and put in a whole lot of links and say, compare these products for me, tell me what is the best price, what is the best. And so they put in the criteria. They don't need you for that anymore. They're not going to come and go, let me read these reviews, unless you can give it to them in a way that makes sense for them. So how are we making sense about, like, you know, it's in a way, it sounds like we're having an existential crisis as an industry, but we have one every 5 years, so it's okay, and we always get through it. But really, like, I think a lot of newsrooms around the world have to do quite a bit of soul searching, and the ones who aren't investing in proper journalism. So ChatGPT is not going to interview the woman who lost her entire family in a car crash, or ChatGPT is not going to, you know, the interviewing, the real kind of stuff that makes what we do magical. I don't think ChatGPT or any other AI tool can do that. What it can do is enhance what we do, and I think a previous speaker spoke about using it as salt to flavor your food instead of it being the actual dish. But we have to also open our minds to it. I think there's still it's journalists, right? Journalists are cynical and go like, oh, you know, this is going to blow over next week, and we are often stuck and set in our ways. But another risk is that we keep doing the same thing and thinking that AI must just help us do it faster or in a different way. We have to radically change what we think and how we do things. And that's hard. It's hard to change it at the best times. It's hard. But now you have, not only are your teams changing and your industry changing, but consumers are changing. What consumers want and how they want it, where they want it, and when they want it. We are seeing day by day how it's shifting. And if we don't move fast enough and we don't anticipate what they're going to do, that is a big, big risk for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree with you that there isn't a choice, in the sense that it's not just do you use AI or not. I agree with that, but also it's not a choice between AI and human journalism. You know, that you've got to do the AI, but actually the bit that's going to make you stand out is your judgment, you know, your empathy,
Absolutely.
your real world connections, your sense of identity and community and your values.
Yeah.
You know, all those things can be literally, that's the business model going forward. Yeah. Clement, as Charlene has said, and Nikita as well, that theoretically, if you're using AI to create content or services, then anybody else who's got the AI can also do that. How are you going to differentiate yourself going forward? Because obviously you've got a very loyal audience, a substantial audience. You talked about wanting to expand that through things like translation, which is really exciting. But how do you differentiate that sort of core offering that you have?
That's a good point. And one key things that we are working on right now at Brut is to do model specializations, because what makes a media different from another one is also the way that is talking to the audience, and the way its tone of voice. And what we think is that if everyone is using AI into their process, because ChatGPT or LLM, generalist LLM will be everywhere in the near futures, into all the products and the tools that journalists will be able to use. And that those models are not specialized on the tone of voice of the media. We will all have the same tone of voice, sorry. And so it's for us an important point to make Brut still different from other media, is to specialize small LLM models and integrate that into our workflow, and not only working with most famous LLM on the market right now.
Because there's a relevant question in the chat here from Jessica to you, Clement. You know, that she is really interested in video editing and really struggling to find the tools. But you're saying that, are you building them yourself, or are you using off-the-shelf stuff?
Both of them, actually. We have a make or buy strategy. It really depends on the use case that we are currently running. If it's available on shelf and it works well, and it's cheap, we buy it. Obviously, because we have a small team and we do not want to reinvent the wheel for each use case. But when we see an opportunity for us to build a product and that will help us to make us different, we are building it. Yeah.
Yeah. Next question. I don't know if one of you wants to pick up this one. It's about it's from Kaifa Friedi, and it's talking about misinformation, basically. Obviously, we all know that these tools are going to be used to churn out a range of kind of disinformation, hate speech, propaganda, and so on. Do any of you feel that it's part of your job to try and counter that? Can you use AI to do that? Who'd like to have a go at that one? Charlene?
Yeah, sure, I'll have a go. So I think we just, I mean, that's always been a role that the media has played in society, is to help our audiences find their place in the world, understand. We help to inform, educate, all of the things that we do with everything. And this is not actually that different. When we talk about how are we going to help our users get to where they need to be, to understand, whether it is to understand how to use the technology or what the dangers of it is. We ourselves, the difference here is that we ourselves have been figuring it out along with them. Usually we are kind of a step ahead, but now, you know, we're also there. So I think it is important, and I think it is for just the normal role that we play as journalists, but also for what it means for journalism. Fake news, I mean, you know, this whole AI slop thing is a real problem. I see this stuff on social media And I think, how could anybody possibly think that that is not AI? But I am a journalist, so I know what to look for. I know how to spot, this auntie's fingers don't look quite right, or ears slightly out of place. And if we can help people to spot that too, why wouldn't we? Like we have a responsibility. That is a core part of why we exist. So I think it is on us also to help people to understand when they're spotting something different. Our society depends on that.
Yeah. Nikita, another question, which I think you might, because you do a bit of this yourself, from Phil Clark, who's asking, what do you think is the best reporting about AI from journalists that you've seen?
The best reporting about AI in journalism, I think something that is really getting into figuring out where the data is coming from and investigating the inherent biases that exist in the data and how technology companies are dealing with it, and how are they mitigating the risks that are there and keeping them accountable. Some of the best, we were just here, Charlie was saying at this conference, we have Crystal from Der Spiegel, who was investigative journalist, really looking at the data behind image generation models, how it was ethically sourced, the bias that exists in the data. And I think those are some of the ways in which we need to be investigating. But in addition to that, I don't think AI reporting is going to be left to just the tech reporters. Every single beat reporter is actually reporting on AI as well. You're reporting on how AI is being used in healthcare, how it's being used in education, how it's being used within the government. So if you are covering the parliament, that's also looking at and asking and keeping the government accountable on how they are thinking about AI, the AI policies that are there, but also how they're integrating it into their work. And I think that's where we have to see a lot more. And I think that's what I hope we would see in the future, is AI is not just relegated to the tech reporters to do it, but we're going to see it across the industry. Every single beat reporter also is fundamentally literate about AI, knows exactly what the different terminologies means, and can hold all of these companies and industry leaders to account.
Thanks for that, Nikita. I mean, that everyone else can jump in if you want, but there's a question I think you might want to address, Clement, which is around the personalization, for people, which, some people are slightly worried about, are they going to get over personalized recommendations and feeds? On the other hand, a lot of people welcome it. They want you to curate for them. I wonder how much of that kind of personalization you do and where you see that going in the future.
For now, for us, personalization today is only in the feeds that we have on our mobile app. So we have a discover part like you can have in TikTok or any other social platform, where we have recommendation models that suggests videos to our users in a personalized way. You have the choice to activate or deactivate. You had the choice because it's no longer exists, but you had the choice to activate or deactivate the algorithm if you didn't want to. And we also integrate some features into these recommendation models to lead you out of your filter bubble, because we know that recommendation models tends to recommend you always content that obviously that you like, but tends you to put you in a bubble. So that's kind of a feature that we had in our tools.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I just want to add to that just 1 second about the personalization, because we're talking about recommendation systems, but I think the next level of personalization is also going to be about conversational dialogue with news. The technology is already here, where it's not just about recommending homepages, but about really building understanding with our audience, where they can have back and forth conversations through voice, being able to have a personal news digest for them. That's the next future I think we're going to start to see a lot of as well.
Charlene, you may have noticed I don't know if you saw the video that we played at the beginning of the panel, but one of the people quoted was Alexandra Borchardt. She's asked a question here. She's so intrigued by what you said about AI can in some ways give newsrooms much more control, which is exciting. And of course, other people argue actually, and you alluded to this, that the platforms are going to get more and more control. And indeed, their control won't just be the distribution bit, but it's actually going to be around news gathering and indeed news production. Are you happy with that? What could you do about it?
About the platforms gathering news and information? Is that
Yeah,
the question I'm understanding?
we're relying even more upon them, for the tools that enable us to do that, I guess. I mean, I would say we're even already there. We have been for some time using, I don't know, Google search. And increasingly, we're going to be having these tools and the data sets that they have that control over. Is that something we're going to have to live with?
Yeah. So there's a balance, and I think Clement also spoke about the build or buy kind of strategy that they have. You have to, what is the toss up? If you have dashboards and all the access to the data that a platform, whatever it may be, has, but it's useful to you for you to be able to do what you need to do, that's okay, right? But if it is negatively affecting you, and I mean, I won't go into all of the details around that, we're seeing lots of pushback from governments around what is okay and what's not okay. Who has the most power? Who has the most control? And what does that mean for media globally? We are seeing big cases underway. But when I talk about the kind of control that we have, those big tech companies are taking media content for a reason. And they want to partner with media companies for a reason. What we do is special, and what we do is not easily replicable just by a robot or machine. A lot of it is. A lot of the stock standard, cut and paste kind of stuff, that kind of journalism is in trouble. But the special stuff, the stuff that requires a human being to identify this is the same child as this child, as one of the previous speakers. Yes, of course, the technology will also get better in that regard, and it will probably become easier for the tech to do that. But there's a human connection that the tech companies cannot offer consumers right now. And as long as we focus on that and we remember that, and we remember that we are here to serve audiences, and how do we serve them in the best possible way, that gives us the control. The platform that you use, if you find it does not serve you, don't use it. If you can build a dashboard yourself, build it. If you can get first-party data, get it. Build it goes back to my point earlier of the relationship we have with our audiences will become ever more important. The gap between us and them, so the journalist and the consumer, will get smaller and must get smaller. Otherwise, you have this big kind of tech giant in the middle, and you can't really see your consumer because you have to go through the tech giant. You have to make a call about what are you willing to give up, and what are you willing to get out. And I think we are becoming smarter. We are becoming better at knowing this is okay and this is not okay. And we will increasingly become more sophisticated in our understanding of what tools serve us and what don't.
And I guess exactly, different people will have different choices, just like they do now. Some people, I think, Clement, you mentioned that you're using avatars. Other people will be using, full-blown synthetic presenters or whatever, but other people may choose not to. We've got a question here from Ahmad Zaglami, which I think he's got a couple of interesting questions, actually. It's around what ethical frameworks do you think journalists and AI practitioners need to adopt to navigate the increasing integration of AI in storytelling? I know, Charlene, you mentioned guidelines, but Clement, I wonder whether you think there is a particular, whether you just carry on making the same judgment calls that you've always made, or do you think there are particular, kind of ethical risks around AI itself?
Yeah, sure. At Brut, we try to always put a disclaimer on the content that we generate through generative AI, whether it's a video, whether it's images or text. but it's always with the supervision of a journalist or someone in the team, editorial team. So finally, the responsibility is still the responsibility of the journalist and the ethic of the journalist to use generative AI or not for the content that is produced.
You're muted, Charlie.
Yeah.
Mute. The next question also from Ahmed, which I think takes us into the last little bit of this session is, I mean, we're all still sort of catching our breath. We're all kind of dealing, well, you guys are dealing, I'm not having to deal with it personally, dealing with the implications in newsrooms. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm really struggling to keep up with this, and I've got a whole kind of network and a think tank devoted to it. But I wonder if you sort of think, this is our 5th year. In 5 years' time, do you think it will look the same? Do you think your newsroom will look the same? Do you think your product will look pretty similar? You know, the AI will just be internalized. You know, my prediction is we won't even use the phrase AI anymore in 5 years. It'll just be how we do it. But you know better than I. Where are we going to be in 5 years? A ridiculous question, but let's try and answer it. Starting with you, Nikita.
Well, you're gonna hold me to account in 5 years, Charlie, by playing this in another video. Well, but I think news will look very different in 5 years. And the reason for that is because our audience will change in the way in which they interact with their information ecosystem. And because generative AI is fundamentally a user experience revolution, it's changing the way in which people are getting and consuming their information, from those AI-generated search overviews to just going to ChatGPT and talking to it and getting information back through just listening. And so that's why newsrooms will look different, because we will have to adapt to the way in which audience are going to get the information and start to think about that. And one of the things I always talk about is that what we are seeing is an evolution into an AI first newsroom. And we had the print first newsroom, which was all about an era that was defined by a lot of the physical constraints of you had to print this newspaper. It was a lot of high control, slow cycles. You then went to a digital first era, which was suddenly anybody, anywhere in the world, as long as they have access to internet, can now go and access your information. But now we're headed to this AI first era where anybody can produce content, and they can be able to receive content and understand information in the way they want it, in the language they want it, and in the specific locality in which they want. And so that AI first world that we're going to be in is going to force newsrooms to start thinking about not AI as just a team, but as an infrastructure you're building within your newsroom. It's about changing and not just thinking about automating workflows, but it's about fundamentally thinking about how we give our information to our audience, but also how can journalists harness the power of AI to do better journalism, to do journalism that we couldn't do right now, that we couldn't do before, because we just did not have the technological capabilities to do that. And just as Charlene was saying, I think this is giving journalists the opportunity to be able to dream, think big, and they are able to do it, because now you don't need to be able to code to be an AI person. You can go and build your own bots that are going and analyzing documents. So I think just as digital required us to rethink everything from our story structure to revenue models, AI first news organizations are having to reconceptualize that entire news experience, all the way from just how we deliver information to what type of news and what type of services do our audience really want. So I think that's the evolution that we'll be seeing in those 5 years.
Yes, and Charlene, you know, you gave this optimistic vision of you know, the human element being more important in some ways, and I agree with you. But I wonder, I know it's not you're not in charge of the business model for Media 24, but I wonder if you can see that changing in the future. I mean, there are so many different business models, aren't there? Foundation funding, subscription, advertising still, community fundraising, etc., providing other services and so on. Where do you think the industry generally is headed, or Media 24?
Yeah, so Charlie, I think I won't comment on Media 24's business model, because I think at this point, and because this is true for everyone, We just don't know in 5 years what it will look like. It is impossible to say. What I do think is that many of the things that that we think now is difficult to do in the next year or two will not be difficult. And when we think about what are the core sources of revenue, traditionally it was advertising and consumers, increasingly shifting to subscriptions. And what does that look like in 5 years? I think what we know as subscription and what we know as advertising, it will transform completely. It will not be banners or sponsorships or native. It will be something that I think has not yet been invented. And that's exciting, right? It's terrifying, but also exciting. Because I think for the first time, we have an opportunity to completely break out of the boundaries that we have been operating in for many, many years. The media might change, but we still pretty much do the same things. And now we are thinking about things that shouldn't be possible, but will become the norm. It will become the norm in the same way that something like TikTok transformed the way people consume video content and what that means for example, Clement's company and for newsrooms around the world. And everybody wants to pivot. Let's all pivot to video. And you mentioned Facebook video. Let's all pivot. If that's not what your audience wants, that they will not pay for it. What are you going to do that's relevant for them? What are you going to give them that they'll say, you know what, I'm willing to give you this money instead of giving it to Netflix or TikTok or whoever, whatever the case may be. Things like e-commerce. How does that fit in with news media? Traditionally, it doesn't, but maybe there's an opportunity there. We talk about licensing rights with film studios or music studios. We didn't traditionally play in that space, but maybe we will. Or maybe they will want to play in our space. And what does that mean for partnerships, relationships, and that kind of thing? So there might be that kind of, the sources of revenue that we have now, it at its core might still be the same, whether it's consumers, subscription or advertising, but the way in which it comes in, I think is going to, we have not yet figured out what that's going to look like. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're cautious, because I think anybody who predicts what's going to be happening in 5 years is onto a loop. But I do I do like the way that you differentiate between, there's some pretty obvious stuff that you have to do internally in the next few years. You know, get your act together around this. But then this idea there are going to be external factors, like you said. If they reinvent advertising again, then there's not much you can do about that. So you'll sort of have to prepare for the unprepared. Clement, last word to you. Are you prepared for the unforeseeable?
We try to be prepared. And so I totally agree with what has been said before. And from a technical perspective, I think there are like four things that will come in the near future. Is more vocal assistants. So far we've been able to learn how to prompt a generative AI, but soon we will have to learn how to talk to them. Video generation as well. Amazon released a big announcement this week about the new models, and we'll have more of that next year. More assistants, so we will not talk about generative AI or AI, but assistants. And also more specialized, smaller, and owned open source models and LLMs for companies.
Yeah, really interesting, really interesting. So much happening at a granular level as well as, you know, big landscape stuff. We have run out of time. Thanks to the audience for the great questions and for paying attention. I'm convinced that you three, as long as you don't get bored of journalism, I don't think you will, it's in safe hands for the next 5 years if you guys are involved. And I hope I wish you the best of luck for that. And I really hope that I'm around in 5 years to put you all in that video and we can see what happened. But thank you so much. That was a fascinating discussion, and you've been really generous to share your experience and your views. So thanks very much.
Thank you.